Eagles postgame show. The last time we're doing this year, and we do it on a disappointing note, is the Eagles looked like they were going to win another Super Bowl, and they wound up losing at 38-35 with a defensive meltdown in the second half. And the man who covered this game in Glendale, Arizona, is with us, John McMullen. John, to me, it's a devastating loss because they looked like they had the game in hand. How did you see it?
That was a dominant performance. I mean, if the Chiefs didn't get that uncharacteristic defensive touchdown off the Jalen Hurts, essentially unforced error, the Eagles are running away with that game at halftime. It was still 24-14. The yardage differential was like 270 to 128, somewhere in that range. They were dominating the football game. We always talk about Super Bowls. You have the long halftime show. It's a little bit different. They didn't want to use that as an excuse. Nobody ever wants to use that as an excuse. The field was evidently an issue, but both teams had to play on it. A lot of slipping going on. Really, the NFL should be ashamed of themselves because there's so many issues with this Super Bowl, logistically behind the scenes and all this kind of stuff. But to have the biggest game on a field like that, both teams said it was just bad. But again, to Jason Kelsey's credit, Hassan Reddick's credit, they talked about how bad the field was, but they both pointed out both teams on there. So there's no advantage. But Hassan did say it was the worst field he's ever played on. And this is the Super Bowl. NFL should be ashamed of themselves, but Eagles had every chance to win this game, and they didn't get it done. And it's, Jonathan Gannon is probably the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals next week, and we've come full circle. He's enemy number one. He got a little bit back in the good graces of Philadelphia with his sort of viral quote before the San Francisco game. They fell apart in the second half. They could not stop the Chiefs.
John, what did Jalen Hurts say basically what led to the actual fumble? Because he's such a ball security consistent individual. I mean, that just shocked everybody.
Yeah, it is. Anytime you see, Jalen has taken such great care of the football this entire season. Just trying to move the football from one hand to the other. It's one of those things occasionally. That's what we talked about when the Eagles were plus 15, right? D-Gun, we said, well, eventually you can't keep going at that pace. You're going to regress to the mean. And the Eagles did. They were still a very good team. I think they ended up plus 8 or plus 9. Still very good, but you knew it couldn't stay at plus 15. Sometimes those things happen, but I got to tell you, Jalen Hurts was phenomenal in this game. And it's a shame that they weren't able to get it done because – man, we know about the mobility, but he was throwing the football well. He had some tight window throws to Dallas Goedert that, watching them live, they were pretty impressive. And when he set a new record, obviously, for rushing yards by a quarterback in the Super Bowl. He's over 300 passing. He's got the 3 touchdown rushing, which ties another record. He would have been the MVP, just like if Patrick Mahomes didn't exist in the regular season, he would have been the MVP probably. But unfortunately for the Eagles, Patrick Mahomes exists, and he was a magician in that second half. The Kansas City scored 3 touchdowns on 3 possessions, and they would have had a fourth if Jerick McKinnon wasn't savvy enough to slip down at the 2-yard line, because I got news for you. Miles Sanders probably takes that in, but he understood the situation and essentially won the game by going down at the 2-yard line. That was a very, very heady play by Jerick McKinnon.
John, what, from your vantage point, happened to the Eagles on both sides of the ball? I mean, they just looked like they were just going to run away with this thing, at halftime. And we come out in the second half, I was talking to the guys during the game. I was like, I really wish the Eagles could have figured out a way to score 7 points instead of 3, before half. I said, because Kansas City's going to come out, they're going to make their adjustments, they're going to go right down the field, they're going to score, we're only going to be up by 3, it's going to be game on. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And then we come back, offensively the next series, and we consequently go 17 plays, 60 yards, and only get a 33-yard field goal out of it. And the rest of the way, we got nothing done from an offensive perspective until, the last drive where Jalen Hurts actually, tied the game up.
Yeah, but Seth, that last drive was pretty impressive because when the Chiefs, and we've been talking all year about special teams, if the Eagles continue going down this road, is going to bite them at some point. And we went all this way and we got to the Super Bowl, and here we are with Kadarius Toney and the big punt return, setting up the touchdown. All of a sudden, you're looking at it, you're saying it's a 35-27 game, and you're saying, uh-oh, Eagles are in trouble. And, people had talked all year, well, can they come back from behind? Can Jalen Hurts lead this team from adversity? That drive would go down in Eagles lore if they won this football game. Everybody will forget about it. It'll be a footnote. But that was a tremendous drive and a 2-point conversion where Jalen just carried people in the end zone to tie the football game. Mm-hmm. And he did everything. The offense did everything they needed to do, and they never got the ball back. Well, they got the ball back with 4 seconds, but you get my point, because the defense, let's be honest, they did not hold their water in the second half of this football game.
Well, my point is, I'm not the point is not to disparage, what they did on the offensive side of the ball, because you got to have the ball, like you said, in order to get things done. Offensively, defensively, we just couldn't get off the field. But we had no answer in the second half for Patrick Mahomes and his defense, and I'm just wondering why. If Jonathan Gannon has been so good at adjusting throughout this season, and he looked like he had no answer whatsoever. The players look confused. You get Darius Slay get beat, one play, and then Avonte Maddox comes back the next series and gets beat on the same exact play on the other side of the field. What was going on from a communication standpoint that,
Well, I talked about that all week. Communication was going to have to be big against the Chiefs in the back seven. I talked about it all week. I hammered it. I tried to hammer it. It was going to have to be really, really big because Travis Kelce is so good in the middle of the field. He knows when to sit down. He and he and Patrick Mahomes are like a great basketball duo who understand what the other one's doing at all times. They have that sort of sixth sense between themselves. And you really need to be on your P's and Q's when it comes to communication. And the Eagles weren't. They weren't. They had a bad game. They couldn't deal with Juju Smith-Schuster, never mind Travis Kelce, in the middle of the field. And it's disappointing to have that kind of performance at this level in this type of game, especially when you have all the momentum going into halftime. And whether everybody got into Rihanna or they're paying too much attention, I asked Nick Sirianni that after the game, what happened at halftime? Did you put your finger on it? Because they were dominating that football game. They were dominating. And they came out in the second half and completely different game. Completely different game.
John, there was a serious lack of aggression defensively in the second half. And I wonder if nothing was done to change the momentum at all. Nobody stepped up and make a play. They didn't stunt to get pressure on the quarterback. Did Sirianni say anything about their lack of aggression? They were on their heels most of the second half and allowed Kansas City kind of to dictate. So, we're all disappointed at that. Was the head coach disappointed? Did he say he was or address that at all?
Yeah, of course he was disappointed. I mean, anytime you give up 38 points, it's not a good day defensively. I had a feeling this was going to be a bit of a shootout. I did talk on the pregame show about I think people don't understand how good Kansas City's offensive line was. And Patrick Mahomes was getting the football out of his hand quickly as well. So, 78 sacks in the first 19 games. In the 20th game, 0. Sorry, 18. You get my point. But 78 sacks, and they don't get to the quarterback. Now, part of that is Mahomes getting the football out. Part of it is the Chiefs' offensive line. But Hassan had some things, and Josh Sweat, they had some things going in the first half. Nothing in the second half. And the Eagles have relied on the talent of very good players to get pass rush. Hassan Reddick has had a tremendous season. Josh Sweat, first team in NFL history to have 4 guys who had 10 or more sacks. They were never going to move off what they do that got them here. And on the biggest stage, in the biggest moment, the defense didn't perform.
John, isn't that excuse me, D, isn't that stubbornness, though, to say that they're never going to move off of it? You know, because we've talked about the lack of pressure that this defense brought, and they really didn't need to bring it because they rushed the passes so well. But don't you have to take into account every single game within your packaging and your sub-packaging the fact that, you know what, a team just might have a good day against you, and you might have to adjust on the fly instead of just relying on the pure talent, that you might have to run some TE and some ET stunts and some tackle twists and bring some delayed blitzes and show pressure from one side and drop out. You know, is that not in your arsenal? Is that not your responsibility as the defense coordinator to be able to adjust on the fly in the biggest game of the season?
Well, sure. I mean, Jonathan's going to take heat, but I think everyone looks at it, and Seth, halftime adjustments are kind of overrated. You got to adjust from, series to series. But
exactly,
they were generating pressure in the first half. They weren't getting sacks, but they were generating pressure. So, if you're not only Jonathan Gannon, but if you're Vic Fangio Consulting, if you're Jeremiah Washburn, if you're Tracy Rocker, you're saying, all right, keep doing what you're doing. You're killing it. Game should have been 24/7 at halftime. So, should there have been a sense of urgency maybe in the last 5 minutes of the game? Yeah, I guess you can argue that. But one of the things that also played into it was the running game. I mean, Kansas City was running the football as well. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, if you look at his final numbers, they weren't great. Jalen Hurts threw for more yardage. He didn't throw for a ton of yardage. The most disappointing part of all was the run defense and the fact that they were getting gashed in big spots. And I didn't expect that. I really didn't, especially in the second half with Andy Reid, facing a deficit. So that, to me, was even more disappointing.
Hey, John, the stats show the Eagles ran for $115, average under 4 yards a carry. The bulk of those yards coming on the legs of Jalen Hurts, who has 70 yards rushing. What happened to the overall rushing game, the trio of running backs in the backfield, number one? And number two, was there any mention after the game whether the hand was bothering Miles Sanders? I was told shortly after he got injured it was a hand injury. And
yeah,
was there any
Miles
talk about that?
Miles did not play well.
No.
Miles did not play well from that first play. Was inside zone. He kicked it outside like old school Miles Sanders that we used to criticize, and he got hurt on that play. And all of a sudden, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott are in there. But yeah, and that plays into my point, D-Gun. So 115, 115 for the Eagles, 158 for Kansas City. Who had that? Especially in the second half, again, Pacheco, Mahomes ran the football very, very well despite his ankle sprain. McKinnon, 4 carries for 34 yards. 4 carries for 34 yards. The Eagles didn't tackle well, didn't communicate well. Yeah, the field was an issue, but as I said, both teams had to play on that field. Hassan said he changed his spikes because it was so slippery. But both teams had to play on that field. So I can't put too much on it. I put more on the fact that Look, this was the second best defense in the NFL during the regular season. They didn't play like the second best defense in the NFL in the Super Bowl.
No.
John,
Second half of the Super Bowl.
I'll say this. You know, when the Chiefs struggled through the first half, I think we all had to know that the adjustment was going to be for the Chiefs to come out and try to establish the run to alleviate, the issue of not being.
Yeah, but is that Seth? Is it with Andy Reid? Are we expecting Andy to establish the run?
Oh, the new Andy, yeah, the new Andy. And listen, he won his second Super Bowl. I mean, if you go back and you look, since the time that they've gone to 4 Super Bowls in the last or 3 Super Bowls in the last 4 or 5 years, you can go on. You can statistically look at how Andy Reid has changed and how he's looked at the game in a much different way, especially this year when you get rid of Tyreek Hill in a trade. Obviously you don't have the deep threat down the field, so the mentality is we want to systematically move the ball down the field. That entails having to be able to run the ball. The Eagles did a very good job against Kansas City running the ball. They ran it 7 times for 39 yards in the first half, and then they came out and just went ballistic in the second half, running the football. So if the thing I admire about Andy at this point in his career, John, is the fact that when something's not working, he will make the change. Where when he was here, he just stuck to his guns. We're going to throw the football. We're just going to keep throwing the football.
Yeah, but I will say, I mean, at the end of the day, 5,200 yards passing, whatever Patrick Mahomes had. I mean, yeah, they don't have Tyreek Hill, but they went about it a different way. Mm-hmm. And obviously, Travis Kelce, 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons, 1,300 yards for a tight end, which is unbelievable. I mentioned Smith-Schuster was wide open all the time. And then the 2 touchdowns, just the design of those 2 plays and guys being wide open. That's what I think about Andy Reid. Andy Reid is the best, play schemer, play caller, big spot, getting guys wide open, rub routes. We think about the Eagles all year. Nick Sirianni's done a great job. Shane Steichen's going to be a head coach in Indianapolis. Great coaching staff. Well, man, how many times have we said over the past 2 years, Eagles get called for OPI, they can't run these rub routes. Andy's teams, they're spectacular at it. Spectacular. And, they understand what you can get away with, what you can't get away with. And then you see these guys wide open in the red zone. You're saying, what's going on? I mean, yeah, at some point you do have to tip your cap to the other team. I mean, we're talking about one of the greatest coaches of all time, and we're talking about a quarterback who started for 5 seasons now. He's been to 5 AFC championship games, so that's his floor. He's been to 4 Super Bowls. He's won 3. He's won 2. He's won 2 MVPs. This is already a Hall of Fame quarterback through 5 seasons. And I talked to Jason Cole last week, who's a Hall of Fame selector, and he said, yeah, I'd vote for him right now if he never threw another pass in the NFL. That's how good Patrick Mahomes is.
John, listen, it's been a great year, and we really enjoyed having you hang out with us. We tried to kind of look ahead at what the Eagles are right now, and they've got a lot of free agents. What does this do to them as far as their progress? Can we expect this team to still be that contender to maybe come back next year?
It's going to be difficult to have a year like this, and that I still say, guys, after this loss, I still say this is the best Eagles team in the Super Bowl era. I still say that. They will never be regarded as that because they bailed on the biggest stage. But I still say this is the best all-around team they've ever had in the Super Bowl era, and they didn't get it done, and it gets more tougher. You're losing your offensive coordinator. You're losing your defensive coordinator. You're probably going to lose a few other assistant coaches. You can't bring these players back. I would be shocked if Miles Sanders is back next year. I would be shocked if James Bradbury's back. They just aren't going to be able to afford these players. And then you have the Jalen Hurts extension, who Jeffrey Lurie said earlier this week, he's got nothing left to prove. If he did, he proved it again in the Super Bowl, had a spectacular game. Joe Banner, you say what you want about Joe, but he knows finances in the NFL. He put the number for Jalen Hurts contract extension at between $47 and $52 million average annual value. The Eagles will have to build this team a different way moving forward. So it gets tougher from here. And they had a great opportunity, and they didn't finish the deal, and it's disappointing.
John, listen, thanks a lot. Again, we love having you on the show. We appreciate it. And I guess we'll talk to you next year.
Thanks, guys. It's been a great year.
Pleasure,
I know people
John.
don't want to hear it, but
pleasure,
great
John.
season.
All right, John. Thank
talking
you so
with you,
much.
John.
All right, let's take a break, and we'll put a wrap on this show. The Eagles lose the Super Bowl 38-35, and what he just said is kind of ominous. When you get there, you always want to clinch the deal because you never know what's going to happen in the future. And he just painted out a picture where they could lose coaches and personnel. It is the Pond Lehocky Eagles postgame show. We're back to